We know you didn't do this, but you going down for it anyway.
When Ray Lewis was charged with double murder in 2000, the NFL was stunned. He later pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor and no one was convicted. Now new evidence has surfaced, putting him back in serious legal trouble. Stay tuned as I give you the full story. The aftermath of the crime. Fulton County Superior Court, Atlanta, May 15, 2000. Judge Alice D. Bonner presiding. From the outside, the prosecution looked ready. District Attorney Paul Howard had spent 3 months under enormous public pressure building a case around 2 dead men and a famous defendant, with cameras pointed at the courthouse from the opening day. Prosecutors had suggested to the public that the evidence would be decisive, a clear account of events, testimony that locked together, and physical proof that placed Lewis at the center of what happened. What the state actually had was a 90-second street fight at 4 a.m., drunk witnesses in every direction, and accounts that shifted and shrank every time a new person took the stand. A jury of 9 black women, 1 black man, 1 white woman, and 1 white man was selected. The trial lasted under a month, and from the first days, the prosecution's scaffolding started coming apart. Witness after witness delivered accounts that contradicted what they had told police. One prosecution witness, Jeff Gwynn, had originally told detectives he saw Lewis strike one of the victims. On the stand, his story contracted to tussling or wrestling, a retreat so significant that defense attorneys argued the original statement had been withheld from them entirely before trial, a procedural failure that added more instability to an already unsteady case. A college student named Evelyn Sparks, who had been riding in Lewis's limousine that night, testified that Lewis was not the aggressor in the brawl. 3 other passengers from the same limo said the same. The prosecution had a single witness who claimed Lewis actively participated in the fight, against 4 who said the opposite, but the most damaging blow landed from the prosecution's own cornerstone witness. D.A. Howard's strategy had been built around Dwayne Fassett, Lewis's limousine driver, the one person with a continuous view of the entire night. From the moment the group left the club to the ride back to the hotel, Fassett's original statement to Atlanta police was stark. He had seen Lewis fighting, and inside the limo afterward, heard Oakley and Sweeting confess that they had committed the stabbings. That statement, had it survived, might have held the case together. It did not survive. When Fassett actually got on the stand, the story he told was different in the one place it mattered most. During his testimony, Fassett said he saw Lewis raise his hands during the brawl, but never saw him strike anyone. He added that he heard Lewis tell his friends to stop and enter the vehicle. The man the prosecution had counted on to convict Lewis had effectively become a defense witness from the stand. The physical evidence offered no rescue. The knife found at the scene contained no fingerprints and no DNA. The medical examiner's analysis pointed away from the larger Gerber blade Sweeting had purchased. The wound profiles were inconsistent with that knife being the murder weapon, meaning the most direct connection between the Sports Authority receipt and the crime scene had unraveled at the forensic level. Baker's blood in the limo confirmed everyone was there after the fight, but confirmed nothing about who wielded a blade. The white suit was gone and stayed gone. The case that had been sold to the public as airtight was, in reality, a structure held together by circumstantial pieces that none of the witnesses could lock into place. The Atlanta Magazine investigation concluded that political pressure had accelerated the charging decision beyond what the evidence could actually support, and the trial had exposed that gap in open court. Mid-trial, Lewis's attorneys, Ed Garland and Don Samuel, approached D.A. Howard with an offer. The terms were straightforward. Lewis would testify against Oakley and Sweeting, and in exchange, the murder and aggravated assault charges would be dropped. Lewis would plead guilty to a single misdemeanor count of obstruction of justice, covering the misleading statements he gave police in the days after the fight, and his instruction to the group in the limo to stay quiet. Lewis's attorneys, Don Samuel and Ed Garland, proceeded to negotiate a plea agreement with the district attorney, where murder charges against his client would be dropped in exchange for his testimony against Oakley and Sweeting. Both sides needed a way out of what the trial was becoming. The deal was accepted. Judge Bonner sentenced Lewis to 12 months probation under Georgia's first offender statute with no jail time. The following day, June 6, 2000, Lewis took the stand and testified against the men he had been charged alongside. He described the brawl, confirmed details about the knives, and positioned Oakley and Sweeting's actions as self-defense in response to being attacked by Baker's group. Then the jury came back in less than 5 hours. Both men, facing potential life sentences, acquitted on every count. The jury found they had acted in self-defense. 2 men were dead, 3 had been charged. Not 1 was convicted of the murders. Years later, Lewis spoke about a specific moment during the proceedings that never left him. He described a conversation, someone sitting across from him and telling him something direct about where the case was headed.
But the saddest thing ever was that a man looked me in my face and told me,
The person was telling him something about what the system had already decided, regardless of what the evidence could or could not show.
we know you didn't do this, but you going down for it anyway.
The NFL imposed its own consequences. Lewis was fined $250,000. At that point, the largest fine ever levied against a player for an infraction not involving substance abuse. In 2003, the family of Richard Lawler filed a civil suit against Lewis for $10 million. In 2004, Baker's family filed a suit for $13 million. Both cases were settled out of court, amounts undisclosed, widely reported to reach into the millions. Lewis publicly described the settlements as an expression of sympathy, not an admission of guilt. Meanwhile, the 2000 NFL season progressed. Lewis led the Baltimore Ravens defense to the most dominant single postseason run the league had ever seen. They gave up a record low number of points that year. They won Super Bowl XXXC, and Lewis was named Super Bowl MVP. The murder charges had been filed less than 12 months earlier. In 2024, Tenderfoot TV released a podcast called The Raven, hosted by Tim Livingston, re-examining the case with never-before-heard interviews, including with Detective Ken Allen. Lewis declined to participate. Fresh questions surfaced about witness handling, the missing suit, and whether fame had shaped the speed and direction of the prosecution. The murders of Jacinth Baker and Richard Lawler remain officially unsolved, with no conviction standing. NFL players' thoughts. When the Baltimore Ravens arrived in Tampa for Super Bowl X5 week in January 2001, the press corps had an appetite for anything but football. Lewis was the most dominant defender in the NFL that year. He had spent the entire season making the case that the charges had not broken him, and the defense he anchored had spent the year making the argument for him louder than any courtroom could. But at each media session, cameras and microphones returned to Atlanta. His teammate Shannon Sharpe had watched enough of it. Sharpe, a future Hall of Famer who understood exactly how media rooms worked, walked up behind Lewis at the podium during one of those sessions without being asked and started talking. He said he wished reporters could know Lewis personally and challenged what he described as a media portrayal that had distorted who Lewis was as a man. He pointed out that not one reporter that entire week had asked Lewis about the New York Giants, about the Ravens' defense, or about anything related to the game they were all there to cover. And then he said the line that would be quoted every time the Lewis case came up for the next 2 decades. If he had not been Ray Lewis, if he had not been an all-pro player, Ray Lewis would have never, ever been implicated. It was a public stand in front of every camera in the building, and it was not a performance. Sharpe had put his own name into the story at a moment when it would have been far simpler to say nothing. The support ran deeper than a podium. During the murder trial in the spring of 2000, Sharpe had picked Lewis up from the courthouse and let him stay at his home. In Lewis's own words, recalled years later, Sharpe was there in a way that went beyond what football teams were supposed to owe each other. Rod Woodson, whose locker in Baltimore sat next to Lewis's, spoke out from the Pro Bowl in Hawaii right after the February 2000 arrest, before a single day of trial had taken place. He said, "That's my man. I hope it ain't true. That's all I can say. He's always been a good guy." After the acquittal that June, he kept it short. "I'm glad for him that it's all over." Peter Boulware, a linebacker on that same defense, said, "He's always been a good guy. Everyone in the locker room likes him. He rallies our team together." Coach Brian Billick publicly criticized media coverage of the case. The organization closed ranks. The team kept winning, and searches across player interviews, social media, and archives since 2000 show that no prominent peer ever publicly accused Lewis of being responsible for the stabbings. The dominant posture in football circles was support, loyalty, and a desire to move past the legal cloud. But the story between Lewis and Sharpe did not end in Tampa. Years later, somewhere, around 2016 or 2017, the debate over Colin Kaepernick's decision to kneel during the national anthem fractured the sport along lines that had nothing to do with the field. Shannon Sharpe was co-hosting Undisputed on Fox Sports. Cameras had caught Lewis on the sideline with both knees down during an anthem moment. Sharpe, the same man who had defended Lewis in every room he walked into during the worst year of Lewis's life, went after him on national television.
"I'm very disappointed in one of my very best friends, Ray Lewis."
Sharpe's argument was direct. Lewis had told the public on record that he would never kneel, that the flag and what it represented meant too much to him, that people in his family had served and fought for what that anthem stood for, and now he was on both knees. The contrast, as Sharpe framed it, was impossible to ignore.
Ray Lewis sat in that chair right there and said that he could never kneel. He could never not stand for the national anthem, because so many people died.
Lewis pushed back the next day. He denied that the moment was a protest in the Kaepernick sense, disputed the characterization, and made it personal, the kind of personal that signals a real falling out rather than a public disagreement.
You got my phone number, brother. A friend picks up the cell phone and say, bro, what was your intention?
That exchange cracked something that had been solid for years. In the 4 or 5 years that followed, Club Shay Shay had dozens of former NFL stars through its doors, but Lewis never appeared. The gap was quiet, but consistent enough that people who followed both men noticed the missing name. The silence lasted until 2025, when Lewis sat down on the PBD podcast with Patrick Bet-David and was asked what he thought about where Shannon Sharpe had ended up, the content, the evolution, the person who had emerged from the field into media stardom.
The things that Shannon has said now or did now, I would never believe that Shannon would say or do any of this.
Lewis talked about watching a man he had known as someone who never drank, a man with specific reasons tied to his family for that decision, become someone Lewis said he no longer recognized. He described it not as a personal grudge, but as a larger pattern he had seen play out across multiple people who had been given a platform.
Take drinking. Shannon, in my entire career, I've never saw Shannon with a drink. Ever. Like it was against the law.
He drew a line between two things he said were not the same, being popular and having influence, and made clear which one he thought Shannon had chosen.
That's a tight rope into what you call influence and popularity. Like the devil has the ability to make you popular.
Lewis's point was that the platform was supposed to build people, to teach, to direct, to give someone a way forward they did not have before. What he was watching instead, in his view, was a race toward noise that had nothing to do with any of that.
God has the ability to give you influence that when people see you, they see an image of him. And that's the thing for me that started to switch with not just Shannon, but just a couple of people. I'm like, wow, you would switch out like that?
When Sharpe responded on his Nightcap podcast across 2 separate segments, he kept it measured. He did not refute Lewis's observations. He did not go back at him directly. What he communicated was quieter. He was aware of what was happening around him. He was not going to participate in the pile-on himself, and he was going to let it go.
I'm gonna go ahead and say my thing. Whatever transpired, I'll bite my tongue. I'll be the bigger person. I'll walk away. Hey, you right.
He also pointed out the timing of the reaction. Everyone who had had nothing to say when he was on top of the world had developed strong opinions once the floor fell out from under him.
Cause you know why, Ocho? It's low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
You know how I know? Cause your boy, you looking at him, he low-hanging fruit. And there are a lot of people taking your shot at your boy.
Sharpe was in the middle of one of the most difficult stretches of his public life, a legal settlement from a lawsuit related to an OnlyFans dispute, the loss of a 9-figure podcast deal, and termination from ESPN, all within the same period. Lewis's comments, whether timed deliberately or not, landed at the center of that storm. The Lewis Sharpe story is one thread. The NFL's wider record on player legal drama is something else entirely. Aaron Hernandez, who played tight end for the New England Patriots, was convicted in 2015 of first-degree murder for the 2013 killing of Odin Lloyd and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The Patriots cut him the same morning he was arrested. He died by suicide in his cell in 2017, while also facing separate charges in a 2012 double murder. The Hernandez-Lewis comparison runs through almost every online discussion of either case. 2 men who faced murder accusations during their NFL primes, 2 outcomes that could not have been more different. Michael Vick pleaded guilty in 2007 to federal conspiracy charges connected to a dogfighting operation he ran out of a property in Virginia. He served 23 months in federal prison, was suspended by the NFL, and eventually returned to the field with Philadelphia. The debates that tie Lewis and Vick together tend to focus on the same thing. One man was connected to the deaths of 2 people and played again the following year. The other killed animals, served 2 years in federal prison, and had to rebuild his career from the ground up. Ray Rice, Lewis's former Baltimore Ravens teammate, became the center of a completely different kind of reckoning in 2014. Video leaked of Rice striking his fiancée unconscious in a hotel elevator. The NFL suspended him for 2 games. After the video reached the public and the backlash was immediate and enormous, The league suspended him indefinitely, and the Ravens released him. The fallout forced the NFL to rewrite its domestic violence policy, something no case before it had managed to accomplish. Ray Caruth, a wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers, was convicted in 2001 of conspiracy to commit murder after hiring a hitman to kill his pregnant girlfriend. She survived, but their son was born with permanent brain damage. Caruth served roughly 18 years. USA Today has tracked over 1,000 NFL-related arrests and citations since 2000, with documented rates for domestic violence, assault, weapons offenses, and murder-related charges that consistently exceed general population comparisons. The pattern across these cases is consistent enough to be described as a structure: high-profile defendants, well-resourced defense teams, charges that moved through the legal system at a pace shaped by who the defendant was, and careers that, in most cases, continued on the other side of whatever the legal outcome was. The player and the night. Ray Lewis was born May 15, 1975, in Bartow, Florida. His mother was 15 when she had him. His father was largely absent, incarcerated for most of his childhood. Lewis grew up helping raise siblings on next to nothing. One pair of jeans, duct tape around his turf shoes. No father, no money. And from the time he was old enough to understand what that meant, a need to make something out of it himself. At Kathleen High School in Lakeland, Florida, Lewis became a state wrestling champion and an All-American linebacker. He went to the University of Miami, one of the country's top programs, and led the Big East Conference in tackles as a sophomore and a junior. He earned first-team All-American honors in 1995 and declared for the NFL draft after his junior year. In 1996, the Baltimore Ravens selected Lewis 26th overall in the first round, their second ever draft pick as an expansion franchise, right behind offensive tackle Jonathan Ogden at number 4. Lewis never played a game for any other team. Over 17 seasons, Lewis accumulated 2,643 total tackles, an NFL career record. He finished with 41.5 sacks and 31 interceptions, and is the only player in league history to record at least 40 sacks and 30 interceptions. He was selected to 13 Pro Bowls, won 2 Super Bowls, 35 in 2001 and 47 in 2013, and was named Defensive Player of the Year in 2000 and 2003. In 2018, he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame on the first ballot. Tom Brady, 7 Super Bowl rings, widely considered the greatest quarterback of all time, said one thing specifically about Ray Lewis. He said the only player he ever feared was Ray Lewis. That is who Ray Lewis was on a football field, but none of those championships had happened yet on January 31st, 2000. Super Bowl 34 had just ended in Atlanta. The Tennessee Titans lost to the St. Louis Rams on the final play of the game. Lewis was not playing that year. He was in Atlanta for the week. The parties, the events, the crowd of athletes and public figures who made the trip every year for Super Bowl weekend. That night, Lewis and his entourage, including Reginald A.J. Oakley and Joseph Sweeting, along with Kwame King, Carlos Stafford, and several women, attended an after-party at the Cobalt Lounge on East Paces Ferry Road in the Buckhead neighborhood. When they left around 4 a.m., they headed to Lewis's rented Lincoln Navigator stretch limousine, parked about 200 yards from the entrance. The other group included Jacinth Shorty Baker, 21, and Richard Lawler, 24, both from Akron, Ohio. Baker reportedly approached Lewis's group trying to sell marijuana. Police found 6 small bags on him when they arrived at the scene. Words were exchanged. Comments about Lewis's jewelry, slurs at the women in his group. The verbal back and forth escalated with each exchange. Oakley stepped up to confront them. Lewis, by his own account and the account of multiple witnesses, tried to pull Oakley back toward the limo. Then Baker hit Oakley in the head with a champagne bottle, and that's when things got physical. The fight lasted roughly 90 seconds in the street. 2 men from the Ohio group jumped Sweeting. Oakley and Baker fought on the ground. Punches, kicks, chaos in every direction. When it was over, Baker and Lawler were down. Baker had stab wounds to his liver and heart. Lawler had 5 stab wounds, including 1 fatal to the heart, with defensive wounds on his hands. Both died. Baker was declared dead on arrival at the hospital. A bystander named Kevin Brown said he pushed one of the assailants off Baker during the fight and heard the words, "I stabbed him." He could not positively identify who said it. The medical examiner noted that whoever carried out the stabbings knew something about anatomy. The wounds to the heart and liver were targeted and precise. Lewis and the group got back into the limousine and left. Shots were fired at the vehicle as it drove away. Bullet holes and a flat tire confirmed this. Inside the limo, Lewis reportedly told the group, "This ain't gonna come back on nobody but me," and told everyone to stay quiet. They went to a hotel. Lewis later took a cab. Atlanta police began working the case from the first hours. Baker's blood was found inside the limousine. Lewis's own blood was found in his hotel room, on a robe and a pillow. Lewis told investigators the blood was from a football injury. Witnesses reported seeing passengers dispose of bags near fast food dumpsters not far from the scene. The piece of evidence that never surfaced and would follow Lewis for the next 25 years was the suit he wore that night. He had on a cream-colored white suit, a mink coat, a Stetson hat, and approximately $250,000 in jewelry. The mink coat was eventually recovered. The white suit was not, despite hotel searches, dumpster checks, and the clothes turned over by others in the group. A 2003 civil filing alleged that Lewis's mother instructed a companion named Jessica Robertson and others to dump a roughly 4-pound clanking bag from the hotel. Lewis testified he left the suit in the hotel room. His attorney later claimed it went to the cleaners. Neither account was ever supported by evidence. Detective Ken Allen found a small folding knife on the ground near the bodies. No fingerprints, no DNA. But investigators traced it back to a Sports Authority store where Lewis had signed autographs the day before the game. Sweeting had purchased 3 folding knives at that same store, a 7.14-inch Gerber Chameleon 2 serrated blade and 2 smaller keychain versions. The receipt tying the transaction to Lewis's presence in that store was found in his hotel room. When Lewis sat down with Atlanta police, he gave misleading information, claiming he did not know the identities of the other 2 men with him in the limo, and denying he had been present at the scene of the murders. 3 days after the incident, Lewis, Oakley, and Sweeting were all charged with murder and aggravated assault. Warrants were issued for Oakley of Baltimore and Sweeting of Miami. Lewis was arrested. No bail was set initially. He was eventually granted $1 million bail, house arrest in Maryland, no alcohol, no drugs. 2 days later, both Oakley and Sweeting surrendered. Jury selection began. A Hall of Fame career was now on trial. In Lewis's case, his double murder remains. 25 years later, officially unsolved. Oakley and Sweeting were acquitted, found by a jury to have acted in self-defense. Lewis pleaded to obstruction. No one has ever been convicted for the deaths of Jacinthe Baker and Richard Lawler. 2 families from Akron, Ohio, have lived with that for a quarter century. The player at the center of that night built a second act around redemption, faith, and service, traveling the world, speaking at arenas and prisons, doing philanthropic work in communities, preaching a message about what it means to survive the worst version of yourself and keep going. He entered the Hall of Fame in 2018 to a standing ovation. That is the record, that is the case, and that is where it stands. If you enjoyed this video, click on the ones showing on your screen to enjoy more.